All right, welcome to A Therapist, a Buddhist, and You. My name is Luke DuBois, and I'm one of the co-hosts here at the Recovery Collective. And as usual, I'm here with Zalmal.
Here's Zal. Hello, everyone.
And we have a guest that, if you've listened to our podcast before, we know that you've enjoyed it because the downloads say so. And he's also one of our colleagues here at the Recovery Collective. And the first double guest, we have Jonathan Bronson.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing good. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
If this is the first time you're meeting Jonathan, I do want to introduce him. So let me see if I can do you some justice here, Jonathan. Jonathan has a master's in acupuncture. He studied both classical martial arts, acupuncture, and other healing arts in Japan. In addition to providing classical Chinese medicine and acupuncture at the Recovery Collective, he also teaches at the Maryland University of Integrative Health. Sound pretty good?
Sounds good.
So before we get going, I have a question. I know we've talked about this, Jonathan. I don't know if this is faux pas in your world. What is the difference between traditional Chinese medicine and classical Chinese medicine in your eyes?
Okay. So I think that the easiest way of answering that and to make harmony is that there are perspectives which we would call pre-modern. That means before 1911. And there are perspectives that would be postmodern, and that's everything after 1911. And the gift of the more pre-modern perspective is that the methods that are described are simultaneously methods, but also a cultivational tool to help us enhance our own understanding of the medicine. And so I believe it was Dr. Fruhoff who coined the term classical Chinese medicine to represent that model, and for him especially with herbs. And whereas what is called TCM was born out of an attempt by General Mao to put all Chinese medicine principles that kind of matched the Marxist materialism model into use when the Russians left and he realized he needed a healthcare system. And so it's sort of a taking from the pre-modern perspective with modern analysis, even from a Western medical perspective that doesn't always, there's a gift in it. A lot of people get better from that. I am biased toward the pre-modern perspective because I think it's easier path to, help people. That I don't know if that quite answers.
Yeah, I think it's something that we've talked about. We use classical Chinese medicine for the Recovery Collective as opposed to
traditional Chinese medicine, which is medicine is always political. And I think that, these conversations, it's a multicultural event too. I'm an American-born citizen studying principles that certainly were not born here, but in East Asia, specifically China, and spread around, and every culture in Asia too, kind of adapting their own understanding of some of these principles through the medicine itself, but also through whatever cultural context existed in the country. Mm-hmm. And then somehow all that making its way here. Yeah. And just to say that, I really think that TCM being simplified is helpful in one way because it makes it more available. And so, a lot of people benefit from that. It's 90% of what's taught in the world. And I just want, though, also to say there's this other perspective which allows for, I think, what really most of us are searching for anyway, as acupuncturists, as herbalists, as Qigong practitioners, which is a model for refining our own way that is not selfish or born of ego, but of trying to contemplate and put into practice what the ancients were putting into practice. And more to say about that once we get started about our conversation about acupuncture and addictions.
Good. Well, thank you. And speaking of that, we're really focusing on acupuncture and through the lens of classical Chinese medicine and how it can really help people with substance use and addictions.
So the first thing here is that there is a modern sort of protocol that was born and is used to good effect. And so I don't want to ever diminish perspectives that I don't always use, but certainly to give credit where credit is due. Dr. Mutulu Shakur, who is the stepfather of Tupac Shakur, was a...
Did you know?
Excellent. A doctor of Chinese medicine. And he is the founding impulse of what is known as the Nada protocol.
Are we talking about the auricular?
The auricular acupuncture that you very often will see in inpatient settings, but it's also used for anything that could be labeled stress, post-traumatic stress, sometimes used in organizations like Acupuncturists Without Borders, who are helping people in under, kind of really terrible circumstances, but need to get a lot of treatments in. It's an example of an extremely powerful treatment that can be used in a broad way. So again, just because I have a bias toward pre-modern or classical sort of methods, I have an open heart to everything that is effective, including that.
And how does sticking needles in one's ears have a positive effect with someone with addiction or who's in detox?
The points themselves have a resonance with organs of detoxification. So in, I want to say the late 1950s, there was a French physician who understood that the ear is kind of a hologram of an upside down fetus, and therefore the organ systems you can access them through there. There's associations of the ear with acupuncture that make it possible from a classical perspective. And so 5 points ultimately were chosen based on their affinity for, one, helping somebody calm their mind down. So the first 2 points are called sympathetic, which is modern terminology, meaning that it goes to your sympathetic nervous system, helps to stimulate that. The second point relating to emotional stillness is how I'll say it, Shen Men, which means spirit gate, and has to do, again, with calming down. So the first 2 points are really about helping to calm our mind down. And then the points after that, the liver and kidney have an obvious association with detoxification. And then the as a filtration system. And the final point, going with the lung, which from a Chinese medicine perspective has to do with releasing to the exterior as much as it is about breathing in and out. It's like, breathe out, you're releasing something, right? So it's those 5 points that you might see more typically at an inpatient center. And certainly when I worked at Penn North, we used that protocol, and I used it at Tranquility Woods initially. I've used it in other sort of inpatient settings or group acupuncture settings. It's a very powerful treatment that can help people calm down and also enable their process of recovery.
Yeah, this certainly has been integrated in a lot of treatment facilities for many years now because of the positive effect it has.
Yes, for sure.
For those listening on your normal platforms, we're doing video as well. So I hope that when we edit this, that we show the ear and a baby fetus at the same time. So,
kind of see what's
I'm
going
like,
on.
oh yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
It's like the lungs and the trees and the
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Very neat. Cool. What do you think, Zal?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I like the point that the points part of I guess the translation you used was emotional stillness and the spirit gate, something like that. Yeah, that strikes chord with me about, because we've talked about that before, about setting the conditions, so like when we are able to calm it down, we have like a better advantage of what's going on, and then that's like the first step before moving into anything else.
100%. I think we take a lot of decisions rashly. A lot of decisions come from a place of impulsivity. And when that happens, it doesn't always land in a way that we wanted. And 2,500 years ago or so, the first classic of Chinese medicine anyway is already saying exactly that. Talking about how in the first chapter, so you got to know something about classics too in China, in ancient China anyways, that they are a foundation for contemplating an entire methodology, whether it's poetry or medicine. And so the first chapters of any classic are extremely important because the classic is foundational. Therefore, the first chapter is like the first step. And so in the first chapter of the Suan, the Yellow Emperor asks his sagely advisor, why is it that people in ancient times, remember this is 2,500 years ago, that this mythological sort of emperor is asking this question, why is it that in ancient times people could live robustly till the age of 100, but these days they can or only live robustly until about the age of 50? And the answer comes back. Essentially, people are impulsive, they're indulging in over greasy foods or so. They are imbibing wine as normal drink. They are entering drunkenly into the bedchamber and lowering their capacity for vitality. So even 2,500 years ago, there was some acknowledgement of how the decisions we take will impact the quality of our life.
Mm-hmm. Hey listeners, we've got something extraordinary to share, a chance to reshape your journey no matter where you are. You're familiar with Zal Mal's insights on our podcast, but there's more. Through the Recovery Collective, he offers life, mindfulness, recovery coaching, and meditation groups guiding you toward a fulfilled and mindful existence, no matter your location. Zal's journey from a Burmese Buddhist novice to a skilled practitioner equips him with timeless wisdom and contemporary strategies. Whether you're navigating life's shifts, seeking clarity, or pursuing self-awareness, Zal's coaching serves as a compass guiding you toward success. The best part? Zal's approach centers on your growth and empowerment. He equips you with tools to tap into your inner strengths for continuous evolution no matter where you are. Ready to take that next step in your personal growth journey? Connect with Zal Mal and the Recovery Collective at 240-813-8135 from anywhere in the world. Investigating in your journey reaps immeasurable rewards. Let Zal Mal guide you toward resilience, clarity, and empowerment no matter where life finds you. Now, let's transition back into our conversation. Stay tuned, stay curious, and keep your journey growing. And how does that translate with people that you're working with substance use disorder in terms of choosing where to put needles to help them in the recovery process?
There's a further elaboration in Chapter 8 of the Suan called The Secret Treatise on the Spiritual Orchid. of the spiritual orchid, which is about the organ networks being described as a kingdom before they're ever described in terms of functionality, the way we might recognize it. So the heart is like a emperor, empress, and the bright spirit stems from it. And there's a statement at the end of that chapter, very short chapter. It describes these 12 organ networks or officials in a government or so. And it says that when the heart is calm, the kingdom will be at peace. And the implication is that therefore you will also have health and wellness alongside with that. Chapter 8 of the Ling Shu, which is the sister book of that first book, the Suen, both books comprising what's called the Yellow Emperor's Classic. Chapter 8 is called Spirit is the Foundation. And the very first line of that is that the foundation of all health and wellness, if you want, starts with the spirit. And both Bob Duggan, who's one of the founders of acupuncture in Maryland, and Jeffrey Ewan, who's a world-renowned acupuncturist, herbalist, movement therapist, if you want, say, well, whose spirit? The practitioner's spirit or the patient's spirit? So there's a relationship aspect designed into the encounter with someone. So before I even am thinking about which acupuncture point can I choose, it's like, how do I be with somebody so that there's more peace within myself and also with the person in front of me? And then I gather some information through their history, by feeling their pulse, by looking at their tongue and other physical signs. And that leads to, well, which acupuncture points will help to bring this calm heart in order to help bring about greater health and wellness.
Mm-hmm. I think our previous episode before this, we talked about the equation for recovery, and that equation is insight plus treatment plus action equals recovery. And your explanation of treatment is something that we see in our practice, whether it's in a inpatient setting, in a treatment facility, or therapy, or is all you doing your life coaching or mindfulness coaching. It's being that connectedness with that individual to start whatever that treatment process is. So being able to do that, I imagine people share with you. What do they share with you typically when it comes to whether it's you working at treatment centers or an outpatient setting?
I like to leave things fairly open, and people fill in the blanks at their own pace. The theory being, though, whatever life experience and maybe traumas or things of that nature maybe that are informing an addictions process, how do we help heal that moment in time? From a Chinese medicine perspective, we're saying that, didn't really, it's in the past in the sense that it's an event that we could say took place in the past, but really it's still present because it's somaticized. It's still in our body, and we haven't quite figured out how to clear the, to use some modern language, like flesh out the hormonal content or the neural pathway that is maybe even hidden from view.
That's pretty neat. We know that it's somaticized and neural pathways in the brain, and there's a lot of wonderful research, and we've talked about it previously as well in terms of it rewires the brain. But when it comes to the physical body, what are some things that are maybe patterns that you see with people that have abused substances somatically that, you've worked with, I would say thousands of clients? Probably. Yeah. Probably. You've done it for enough years. And what are some of those physical symptoms that you often see, and which triggers your classical Chinese medicine mindset of treatment plan with acupuncture?
I will say that a lot of times what I notice is I will clench or tighten some part of my own body.
Okay.
and not consciously.
You somaticize with them.
Essentially, it's like I notice, in the presence of our interaction, I'm kind of like loosening or tightening in a certain way. And then what I call that is, I wonder if there's some suffering happening over there in that individual. And then I'll ask, is there some suffering going on? Is there something I can help you with in that regard? And very often people pause and then either go into a detailed story of what their journey has been like, or sometimes I don't want to get into it. Just treat me. And so the pattern I find is either, and every practitioner will give you a different answer to this question, but my experience is very much either all the way in terms of here's the whole thing, or very much like, I'm just not ready to say anything yet. And I never have an expectation that anyone has to say anything. Yeah.
And whether they consciously show you that, what happens subconsciously or somatically as a practitioner do you notice in terms of addiction, guarded, defensive, denial, rationalization, or acceptance, or anything in between in that spectrum? As a practitioner, where do you go from there with your modality?
Well, then the question is, how do we help to have this individual feel better about their own life? People are competent, and we learn how to get through life in various ways. And all I'm doing really is to remind people that, hey, we're all human, including me. And I hope that I can help in some way reignite your own wisdom and your own competencies.
As you're talking about the physical body, it makes me think of like the callus being created on the skin. So it's a way of protection. So the recovery journey is, in a way, going deeper into the spirit and then letting it come out, going under those layers. Because there is a lot to be said about, since you mentioned about the calming part first as well, that when I'm not calm, my awareness level is so low because I'm functioning at a superficial level. But then there's something to be said about connecting with another human being or connecting with something beyond your own self. And then the calmness comes in because you're not alone anymore. But then when that happens, awareness arises and you start paying attention to what should be paid attention to. And then some kind of healing arises, because addiction has a lot to do with, like you were saying, like trauma or pain, some healing to be happen, but there's just so much callous around it because, that's how it protects itself.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to go deep into it without calmness, without awareness.
And I would say too that the whole idea of reflecting back what you said, that idea of spirit being the foundation, and that Luke had asked about patterns and maybe physical patterns. And what I'll say is that whether you hold emotions in the realm of physical or non-physical, I will say one pattern that definitely shows up with addictions is that it is almost always, I will just say always, an attempt at medicating pain, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional. Sometimes there's iatrogenic disease where you're getting prescribed something and then, there can be a snowball effect from that. Then very often an emotional piece will come into play with that because of some of the unfortunate negative side effects or symptoms that go along with addictions, substance abuse disorder, that are more of an emotional quality.
My way of looking at that as addiction therapist is I've worked with people that have said if it wasn't for this sports injury and if I didn't get hooked on those pain pills after that surgery, I wouldn't be an addict. But the more that we work together, we find out, that might be a big piece to this whole thing. But maybe to your point, there is this psychological, emotional, social piece that can compound it. Meaning, to me, it's never just one thing.
Right. And to that point, very often we're using the term co-occurring, kind of echoes what you're talking about there. And in Chinese medicine theory, we do have a belief that there's a unconscious or habituated layer to our existence, a conscious layer to our existence, and a subconscious layer to our existence, and that they inform one another. And so what you're saying about somebody that got on some pain medicine, oh, if only I didn't have this sports injury, and then we find out if we examine the unconscious layer, how people are greeting the world, it's like there were other things or other things emerge, and we can shed light on that, and that's good because then we can have a path forward.
How is, I know how I do that through talk therapy, right? So you were sitting with someone and asking them questions, and I know you do the look at the topography of the tongue and check their pulse, radial pulse, but how do I have to verbalize things to help the unconscious or subconscious become conscious. That equation of insight is one variable to recovery. So I guess through acupuncture, you help this insight happen somatically?
Somatically, and through the channel systems, which correspond with the subconscious, conscious, and unconscious mind, or aspects of mind. And so the channel theory itself is enough if there are things that are, and then there are the ways how those aspects of mind are united, and there are channels that unite your subconscious mind realm with your habituated behavior realm, and maybe even bypasses consciousness. We're calling those the divergent pathways. Maybe
I gotta know an example.
Okay.
To me, that's that aha moment we talk about, that light bulb experience. But in terms of your world,
somebody that's driving down the road and they're conscious of what they're doing, and suddenly just start having a panic attack. Don't know why. Where did this come from? There's nothing about what's going on right now that seems like I should be having a panic attack. Often in my questioning, what I'll find out is that there is some old wound, forgotten wound maybe, at everybody's comfort, again, like at their own pace, but very often saying like, this thing happened, and it very often is one of those formative life events. And so constantly sending messages to our subconscious mind about that. And I'll very often start, therefore, with treatment in that realm, because it's like treating the root to treat the branch. And what I've noticed is, like in this context, it isn't using the divergent pathway. It's like going directly to
the underlining potential cause.
Right.
Yeah.
And therefore, the number of times, the frequency, or the intensity of those experiences that seem like they're falling out of the sky start to reduce. And people tell me it's mysterious. I don't understand exactly why I'm feeling a little better, but I'm feeling a little better. And my therapist is telling me like I'm doing better, and we don't really know why, but okay, I'm going to come see you again. Like that would be an example.
Yeah. The thing about addiction is, from my own experience, is that I confuse the difference between treating the pain and numbing away from the pain. Since you mentioned that wording of habituation, once I get so used to numbing, like I just prefer that than dealing with the pain. So like that example that you're talking about is that there is just wound inside, but it was never treated. But I created more wound in other places so that I'll be busy numbing myself with that and never looked at it, So like once that numbing kind of slows down, things just start showing up, which is a scary process, but at the same time, it goes to the root of the problem.
Well, and that goes with what we can call treatment responses too, is that any form of healing, well, I don't care whether it's you've injured your knee or if you're if you're in the process of being in recovery is that there can be moments of extreme discomfort as you get to the other side, because it's like there's a very natural, what you're talking, it's like those layers start to unfold. Sometimes things will come to your mind that you maybe didn't realize were in there anymore. And so the answer is just like, usually the answer is we got to keep pressing on this until there's another side, and there is another side. I've seen it enough. I've seen it in enough people where it's like the tears come out, the fears come out, the rage comes out. And after enough treatment, and almost always 99.9% of the time in coordination with conventional care, and I think it's important to have a team of practitioners when you're going through the process of recovery, because especially if it's a matter of the heart that is the cause, that means relationships. Yeah. So having more of relationships, but that's also to say that when these kind of what could be called healing crisis moments show up, that there's a safety net, other people to talk to about this, other competencies, other perspectives, to other listeners, even just to someone else to listen in sort of an official capacity. And that can help people get to the other side. And it never takes away what happened. What can happen, and it's almost miraculous, is that sometimes people will tell me, I can now think about that event and I no longer feel the sting of it the way that I used to. And I have greater awareness around what are some of my triggers, what other suffering is in there. And now I know what to do. It's not scary often. It can be, but it's like the second time it happens with a different topic, it's like, okay, I've been through this before. I know that I can get to the other side of that.
Yeah, that concept of safety is so essential for an addict, because it all stems from that place of fear, being afraid, not feeling protected. And then that's that habituation to how do I protect myself, But when you have that safety net, like you talk about, that becomes your ground. And then how do I stand in that safety and then look at the wound and then let it heal? Because the thing about, the first noble truth in Buddhism is life is, there is suffering in life, which also means that there's always danger in life. The visible danger, which are visible like fire, tornado, accidents, stuff like that. But there are also like invisible danger, like fear, anger, grief, So like that, there is that sense of safety that is much needed, But when there is that group of people or people that you can find safety net in, you start trusting that, and then you can start that healing process in a way.
Trust. And you said it, like, trusting that there's some ground to stand on in the face of these sort of climatic factors that you mentioned, like a fire or so, but also in the realm of being human, and to trust that, there can be feelings of comfort alongside feelings of discomfort.
Yeah, I think we're talking about what we define as a holistic or an integrative recovery. You use the term getting to the roots, the underlying causes and conditions. Not once have we talked about, oh, you're an alcoholic or an addict because you drank too much or smoked too much. We were talking about some of the more the in-depth stuff in terms of there's layer effects that can lead to consciously or subconsciously coping with substances. But the example you gave of something that happened years or decades ago can be one of the factors that can lead to numbing out the conscious or subconscious.
Right.
I was going to ask, since we're talking about acupuncture, I wanted to know specifically about the roles of needles as well in this process, in terms of either trust, safety, or alignment, calmness,
Sure. So it is one of these contradictions of using something that could conceivably be painful. It's definitely not like getting a shot at a doctor's office. It's usually a very mild feeling. And I also have an awareness that there are people who can feel sort of triggered by the very notion of there's this needle, and some people who are using needles before have told me, like, I don't necessarily want to have that happen. And my offering is, this is a chance, if you want, to redefine your relationship with needles.
And not heroin.
And right, like that it is that this is a needle that is coming for your health and well-being and is wholesome and good, and that you don't need to use those other kind of needles anymore. In the NADA world, when we're dealing with large groups, we typically call them pins to avoid any negative association with the needle aspect. And there are times where it can be this moment of reframing this, what could be scary kind of intervention, and it becomes a healing moment in its own right.
So, for example, you're in an inpatient setting and someone's there for heroin and alcohol, and they haven't used for 2 weeks, and then you find out that this person has panic attacks and anxiety. You've definitely alluded to a certain meridian or protocol, but how do you determine what that is based on, hey, they're for drug X, drug Y, and then you explore other comorbidities or code disorders? What do you do?
So it's really about identifying where the greatest level of the root is, so to say.
Okay.
And that the medicine itself and people are adaptogenic. So if we are able to help at the deepest level, then there's a greater shot of normalizing the functions that are associated with detoxification in their own right.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a cascading effect. So there is also, though, the surface layer of, people who are in withdrawal, whether you're getting NADA or whether I'm feeling your pulse. This is how I would make the call. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm feeling your pulse and I notice, wow, I could really treat this particular pathway and maybe you won't feel so bad. I did that not long ago for somebody they were in withdrawal, and in about 5 minutes, they were not experiencing the same level of intensity that they had been experiencing with the application of one acupuncture point bilateral, so really 2 pins. But the next time I saw them, they were like, I don't know what you did, man, but like, I really did feel a lot better after that. So it's not as though I would treat this as differently than any other ailment. I got to feel your pulse and find out what's going on. I got to look at your tongue, find out what's going on, and then I treat based on that.
So for that example, are you identifying, let me calm down his sympathetic nervous system and any other underlining pathways, or is it something different?
In this case, I was using classical theory, so really it was more like, how do I build his substance up enough, fluids basically, enough to where he can feel grounded? Because imagine if you feeling, I say, thirsty, an insatiable thirst.
Okay.
So it's simultaneously
alcohol. I want to drink. Okay. I'm right there with you. Okay.
And so simultaneously addressing the physical aspect of, is there abundance of fluids that can help blood production, circulation, and storage through the organ networks.
I'm in a treatment facility, but I'm in a desert and I want to drink.
Right.
How do you help? What's happening to my body? What's happening?
Yeah. And then I choose this acupuncture point for like that particular individual. And they also felt mentally calmer at the same time. So we're always saying so from a pre-modern perspective, the mind and the body are not ever separate. We can't ever say that we're not treating one without treating the other. And the term grounding in this case is apropos the acupuncture point that I chose in this case. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, but I need to... I'm obsessing over alcohol, right? I'm white knuckling. I'm holding on to the chair.
Right.
And I guess philosophically in my mind,
Sure.
How is a pen going to minimize my craving from obsession? I want to jump out of my skin. I'm in a desert. I want water to not feeling that. What's happening to me? You mentioned blood.
Oh, I see. So there's this flaring up. It's like a flaring up symptom, right?
Okay.
Like in this fullness of, I gotta use, I don't know what to do. I don't want to be here anymore. The channel that I chose has an affinity for reining that impulse down. Also has a tendency to help in fluid production.
How? I'm obsessing. How do I get out of this desert?
Yes.
I'm no longer thirsty.
So it is something that happens by itself. It's not the last time we talked, Saul, you had this image of, you taking these broad strokes and it sweeps away lots of things at once, right? Mm-hmm. It's like that if you treat the flaring up in this classical Chinese medicine really does represent a science in its own right. And part of that is the resonance aspect of it, which is like this channel has a resonance with a function in nature of which we are a part. There is a function in nature that is about taking what is up and descending it and reining it in. So it's not so much modern knowledge of neurology or of kind of diagnoses or so. It's knowledge of how the world works and how we are a reflection of that. And if we trust that reflection is real, and I do because I've seen it so often. I mean, I didn't initially when I first came into contact with acupuncture, but I'm on the other side of so many things here that I do trust that there's a shot at, oh yeah, there's a flaring up. How do I rein that in?
And that's by energy force? Is that by affecting the blood? Is that by taking me from spring and hyperness to winter and sedative state?
Yeah, you can say it exactly the way you just said it.
Okay.
Is that you could say there's a flaring up. It's like a fire. Okay. And so the question is, how do I balance that using the imagery of Chinese medicine, which is first and foremost exactly the image of seasons, which are, it's so simple, but it's also very profound that we're thinking in terms of there is a time period of store, whether it's an area that has 4 seasons or if it's like a single day. There's a time period of storage. We can call it winter and nighttime. There's a time period of rising up, which we can call spring or morning. There's a time of fullness, we can call summer, or we can call it noontime. There's a time of reining in and letting go that we can call autumn, and that we can call, evening time. And then there's the transition of all those things, and kind of represented by the center. And it is really a symbol, which is like a wave you have. And if you understand that and how that is mapped out on our bodies.
Okay, the mapping.
Then you don't necessarily need to know every little physiologic process. You need to know at least 5 things and how it resonates with our own being. And then you can co-opt it. You can say, okay, there's a flaring up. There's this too much summertime. How do I make the summer like descend? That's an oversimplification, but it is language.
That's good for me. That's
just to help with trying to answer your question there.
And once again, probably an oversimplification, but is the anger, the potential mania, the cravings, the anxiety, the obsessive compulsive examples of heat and flare up in summer?
It's always that there's too much on too little. And I'm kind of borrowing from the work that Heiner Fruehauf has done around this kind of philosophy, where it's like there are these presentations of flaring up, whether it's a physical ailment, somebody that has an autoimmune disorder has a flare up, or if it's like rage is your first response to everything. And what is too little is, in one way, too little energy and too little fluids or blood or so to actually feel anchored, but really stemming from what the classics suggest, that there's too little feeling of connectedness through spirit and relationships and purpose and ritual. And when there's too little purpose, then all these kind of flaring ups can happen. Overuse, over emotional response, or in the case of somebody that has Crohn's disease, this is all a theory.
Sure.
And then we apply how to balance that through practice. And then after a couple thousand years of observation there's something to this. That didn't have modern technology to help assess what was going on.
Yeah, speaking of resonance, everything that you're describing resonates with me about like that idea of the flaring up and then bringing a calmness. There's a specific discourse on breathing-based meditation practice in Buddhism. It's pretty long. It's 16 steps, but the summary pretty much is that the way like you're describing, there are seasons, temporarily, like cyclical, things come, things go, but also like even within the present moment, things are a mixture, So like if I meditate and pay attention to my breathing, I can start observing, oh, that's a long breath. That's a short breath. But then like, what is actually good for my body? And I can regulate it. And then based on that, you start noticing that, oh, I have some anger, but then there's also a presence of pleasantness, somewhere. So like, in the 12-step community, recovery community, people talk about higher power, right? And it's like it can be a mysterious concept, but simply it's like whatever you're thinking about is your higher power, right? In this moment. So like if I'm thinking about my anger in this moment, it's going to keep flaring up. But then if I'm in a calm place, paying attention to the breath, and then when I become aware of some pleasant sensation somewhere, I focus on that. And then I can draw that pleasant sensation to the flaring up place because it's already existing somewhere. Might as well expand it, So the way you're describing really resonate with me with a meditation practice like that, how our awareness can have influence on that flaring up just by drawing the connection from one place of calmness into the other place of anger or, heat.
Once again, if, that's like foundations of Chinese, it's like Chinese medicine 101. So thank you for that. That's such a gift to hear you saying that. And that I think that as we expand our conversations and talk about like various ailments or so, there will be, I hope, a theme that emerges of understanding the importance of, from a classical perspective, that our purpose in life, no matter what it is foundational to health and wellness. And for this topic, definitely applies, which is that we don't have to there's no guess. Once there's addictions, we know that somehow the real purpose is compromised. Like I loved your description of like whatever I'm thinking about right now is my higher power, or maybe I can even say whatever I'm thinking about right now is my purpose. But that there is something within us all where we're, as humans, commonly expressing purpose, whether we're colleagues or being parents or in relationships somehow, but also our own unique gifts that we have in the world and that we can express and for some greater good. And when people start to lean into that, it's like, I know you guys see this too, the brightness starts to come back. And it's like, yeah, I'm still craving stuff, but I feel like there's possibility here. And I think it's fascinating and amazing that the ancients were thinking about, yes, addictions. Even chapter 1 of the Suan is saying that, but also any illness. All illness has this aspect of wanting to restore some sense of greater purpose in the world. So this is a beautiful, beautiful conversation that we're having that applies to addictions and also to really any chronic and recalcitrant disease process.
Yeah, I think we've all seen people that do multiple forms of treatment to bring that insight, that conscious, that subconscious to their own personal awareness is powerful modality. It's a powerful treatment, whether they do mindfulness work and classical Chinese medicine and with therapy. Man, it's just like exponential, the insight and the awareness that can happen. I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
Give us the call to action, Jonathan. Why would someone with addiction, with anxiety, with cravings, with other forms of quote unquote flare-ups should go see an acupuncturist?
I think that we offer a valuable layer of network. That in your network of recovery, you rely on certain routines in order to stay in sobriety. So to go to yoga every Tuesday night or something along those lines, going to acupuncture every so often to deal with these like underlying conditions that have been embodied, you kind of know that it's there. It's like, my schedule got messed up. I had to go out of town. I don't know what to do. Or maybe I'll just get Jonathan on the schedule, or maybe I'll get one of Jonathan's colleagues on the schedule, because I know that that's something that I can go do that will be healthy, that will be a support.
There's been someone jumped in my mind and in their recent story, and the therapy was, they had all this insight, but guess what was there? Flare-ups of anger, irritation, frustration. Now this person could identify that working for about 3 weeks in a row straight with no breaks had an effect, that she did some things that she didn't want to do that her family wanted or made her do was part of the flare-up. And she could identify all these things in our session, but then if we don't identify them and just push them down, boy, that flare-up gets really big, doesn't it?
It can become explosive.
And somatic.
Yeah, and it gets in there, and then you don't realize, and then it's like, where did this rheumatoid arthritis come from? Yes. From a modern perspective, there's a whole host of reasons. From a classical perspective, we are acknowledging the role of emotions and spirit in your health and wellness. And
I wish I could divulge more, but all those things you were saying, the symptoms, but then processing, that makes sense. But it took an hour of her time to be able to look at these things, and she allowed that insight to happen. Yeah. Powerful stuff. Well, thank you, Jonathan, for joining us again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's always good.
Really enjoyed it.
And please check us out. I'm pretty sure we're going to have this one up on our YouTube website